leads the show to the barrier. Everyone watches in admiration, but no one thinks that this is manipulation. So this journalist is mocking politicians there, Zhirinovsky and others, ridiculing them and so on. He is actually controlling the situation. So who is in control? The journalists. Here you go. And they prepare such people specifically, authority. So who refused authority? The professor said, but if a regular Ivan says it, yes, someone. All sorts of people walk around here. They have trained people. If it's an authority, titles are assigned specifically. This is the entire system of academic degrees. It is essentially a system of initiations. Essentially, they are like Freemasons. So if you are a junior researcher, you went there from here. If you are older, already older. If you are a candidate of sciences, that is already a candidate of sciences. Doctor, that is a doctor. And the fact that it is copied from one book to another, so to speak, how all these dissertations are defended. All of this is cultivated in society, and it allows one to be permissive towards others. Well, why am I saying this? Tradition can be distorted in any way from what actually exists. Well, in particular, the history of Rus. I have already said, Holy Rus, Cyril and Methodius, thank you for bringing writing to Rus. But was there no writing in Rus before Cyril and Methodius? There was. And there was a high culture, but somehow it's like somewhere there, some Russians were wandering through the sheets, they didn't know anything. That's why Putin, when he gathered historians last year, said, so when did the history of our country start from 1988? And what was before that? They said, we will go think about it. They left. I'm telling you this. You can take the magazine Versions issue #1 from last year, 2003. There, the task was set. These scholars, historians, still haven't done anything. So, Putin himself went to Ladoga, remember, to the old one, and said, here was the ancient capital of Rus, and there was a fish called Gorderica, and so on. Here they are being formed, and on this basis, historical myths are naturally formed. Leaders' authorities are being given an image. So, what is an image? In translation from foreign to Russian, it means a representation. So who are image makers? They are face creators who form an image completely different from what actually exists. In reality, a person is who they are. Therefore, they become hostages. That is, someone needs to be brought to power, creating a kind image, how he is, how he shakes hands. And people choose, without reasoning about who understood what, meaning what the person offers, but they reason about images, how a person speaks, not what they say, but how they say it. And into the substantive part, because they lack knowledge, they do not understand this. This allows for the manipulation of the consciousness of millions of people. Here, arguing by authority is intellectual mockery. That is, always pay attention. In disputes, when you encounter so-called intelligent people, they always start to pressure immediately. So-and-so said this, such and such said that. They immediately refer to authorities. But what do you think yourself? And he thinks by authorities, he boasts with quotes from there, and so on. By the way, the elite is largely guilty of this. Arguing by authority is the main quality of the crowd. The crowd does not want to solve problems with its own mind. And having become disappointed in one leader, the crowd immediately begins to seek or wait for new ones. This also applies to the elite. The crowd follows the leader passionately, that is, thoughtlessly, irresponsibly, blindly believing in the leader's correctness, and he can be a provocateur like Pop Gapon, like Hitler. Thus, he led and how many he destroyed. This gives rise to the thoughtless permissiveness of the crowd following the leader. The destruction of the authority of tradition or the leader turns the crowd into a rabble. Well, and you see, if we just talked about Hitler, then everything after Hitler is destroyed. Do whatever you want with them. So, if we think about parties, let's draw a parallel. Let's say the party of Zhirinovsky, the LDPR, it's called that, Zhirinovsky's party. Let's put it frankly, if you remove Zhirinovsky, there will be no LDPR, right. But then what is there to follow this party for? Someone votes for it, someone casts their votes, so this party is needed. It is a party of one person. But Zhirinovsky is also a hostage of this system. When needed, they will remove him. And they can remove him physically as well, it doesn't matter how, trample him and so on. The same goes for the other parties. So, leaders are formed, a leader who is like this. And we are precisely saying in the concept that we should not talk about leaders. Well, yes, there should be leaders who coordinate something, activities. We need to talk about what a person offers. So, what thoughts he expresses. But for this, people need to understand, analyze, compare, distinguish, that is, have a measure, distinguish right from wrong, true from false, and so on, just from unjust. This is the concept of public safety. So, it precisely provides such skills, opportunities. The spirit of permissiveness can reign for two reasons. First, the monopoly of the elite on knowledge does not allow others to protect themselves from permissiveness. That is, well, people do not know what, and therefore they pressure. They mention some numbers, facts, historical events, and what about the others? He doesn't know. He can't object to anything. That is, it weighs heavily. So, the defectiveness, on one hand, is the monopoly on knowledge, and on the other hand, defectiveness is knowledge. But what is the defectiveness? They do not know the whole picture. So remember this little pyramid, do you? That is, the elite are given fragmented knowledge, concerning them in part. A lyricist knows lyrics, a physicist knows physics. Each honestly does their job. Therefore, they do not possess holistic knowledge. And this is the defectiveness of this knowledge among the elite. This knowledge, is torn from the whole in fragments. That is, kaleidoscopes suffer from kaleidoscopic idiocy. Incomplete, distorted, materialists, idealists. And so, the monopoly on knowledge and the defectiveness of this knowledge leads to those possessing such defective knowledge being exalted in their self-opinion. How so? I graduated from such and such university. I have a diploma there. I have a title and something else. Deliberately or thoughtlessly, they begin to create permissiveness around themselves and suppress other people. Well, naturally, they inevitably encounter a reciprocal permissiveness towards themselves, cultivated by themselves. By the way, what we are talking about regarding crime, well, let's say there are cultural criminals who rob by the millions. This is what we have in Russia, as they say now with these reforms. When the country was divided up, if you steal 1 million, the state will give you a medal. But if you steal a bag of potatoes, you'll go to prison. That is, the people see that they are being robbed, they see that the country is being divided up. Well, and someone who is weaker or in need as well. Moreover, in extreme cases, this concerns their children, like with Professor Dobrenkov, or now you know, among the elite, like that comedian Zhvanetsky, someone stole a car, someone else was hit, someone was stabbed, and so on. That is, they face the same lawlessness at the level of criminals. This possibility of permissiveness is a temptation. It is based on a monopoly on knowledge. The defectiveness of this knowledge, its incompleteness, does not allow one to understand that this temptation is, in general, Satanism. Thus, the reason lies in the elite's disdainful attitude towards the concept of public safety. That is, the elite treats it this way, right? This is something, indeed, many have started to understand now. In particular, what happened on Echo of Moscow, when Gonopolsky invited Podberezkin and asked, there is this concept of public safety. What do you think about it? And Podberezkin says, yes, something like that, it's nonsense. And Gonopolsky, this Jew, says, what are you talking about? They are already writing dissertations on it. It is already used in government structures, and you treat it so disdainfully. That is, they already have. It raises concern now. And for how many years have they, so to speak, kept silent? Why? because of the principle that a dirty person cannot. Remember that movie, The Mechanical Piano, where Nikita Mikhalkov played, and he sits down at the mechanical piano and supposedly plays, and this one watches and thinks, some guy sat down with a leader and just plays, but then when he realized it was a mechanical piano, he started talking about how a dirty person cannot. That is, do you understand? We are all very much like that. Simple people cannot supposedly invent or create anything. Only the chosen ones can, and the people are just cattle, a mob, scum for them. That's why they treat us this way. Therefore, we need to become the people, both the crowd and the elite. Therefore, a totalitarian system is a hierarchy of paired relationships. Here it is presented at the top. The elite form certain beliefs and principles regarding the lower classes. It's not your business. Know your place. And what opinion is formed at the bottom? Here it is. I am a small person. What does it matter to me? He is a slave. He knows better. These opinions formed among people allow for the maintenance of this principle of division, harassment, and domination. What is the conclusion here? Totalitarianism exists due to the socially accepted permissiveness of the minority and everyone's right to thoughtless insensitivity to what is happening everywhere around, and the concentration of control in totalitarian systems. In a totalitarian society, this concentration is the centralization of control, that is, the centralization of control. If the word concentration, to some, it is unclear. The concentration is in an increasingly narrow circle. That is, the analysis of the global historical process shows that throughout human history, there has been a process of centralization of control over the productive forces of humanity. And this process is objective. That is, it does not depend on our desires or reluctance. Whether we understand it or not, it exists. It has been happening and continues to happen, and it occurred both at the regional level and at the global level. And an example of the regional level, as I mentioned in the introductory lecture, is our country. That is, there was the Moscow Principality, and then there was subjugation, the gathering of lands, which was mainly done by the Cossacks, Yermak Timofeyevich, Khabarov, Dezhnev, and so on. They annexed lands. This concentration occurred at the regional level, and Eurasia is a regional civilization. But a similar process was occurring at the global level. There, the process of concentrating the management of humanity's productive forces at the global level was harnessed by the ancient Egyptian priesthood. We also examined this together. And management, if the very process of concentration is objective, then managing it is subjective. What does subjective mean? It depends on the will of the one who manages this process. That is, on what ideals guide the one who manages. And what ideals can be in the extreme, good and bad. That is, one can manage for the good of people, or one can manage for one's own benefit. That means to keep your well-being there, your loved ones, others for cattle. Therefore, that means this is a concept, and it is bad in the Bible. And you will rule over many nations. They will not rule over you. At the regional level, control centers in the regions of the planet, these are local priests. In the course of the global historical process, were forced to open access to ever higher education, more and more, to wider layers of society. And look, in the beginning, as it was, in the very ancient times, there were these pseudo-priests, healers. Then their circle expanded in connection with the widening range of tasks, and the aristocracy appeared. Noble, titled nobility. That is, there became more of them, you see. Then the nobility appeared, and there were even more of them. Then the bourgeoisie appeared, and there were even more. And now there are plenty of managers. And now, so to speak, what is this management leading to? That the expansion of the elite led to broader layers of society being managed in relation to everything. And this sets the task. Here it is. We come to the necessity of expanding the sphere of management to the boundaries of the entire society. After all, if you think about it, even the owner of a small kiosk selling these Snickers is already a manager. Why? Because he knows accounting, fire safety, knows turnover, sales, management, and so on. That is, he is a manager. And this leads to what task? Thus, scientifically expanding the sphere of management to the boundaries of the entire society, and generally speaking, to the task of self-governance of society. At the global level, a center of management with claims to world domination was formed in ancient Egypt. Why in ancient Egypt and not with us? Because Egypt of that time, the state of the Nile, that is, on the left and right, a narrow strip of fertile land, beyond it desert. On this narrow strip, many people, everyone wants happiness. There isn't enough happiness for all. Social tension is exceptionally high. And who was supposed to solve the problems of that society? The one who ruled Egypt. Who ruled? We are told it was the pharaohs. The pharaohs were boys, inexperienced. The real rulers of Egypt were the ancient Egyptian priesthood. There were 22 hierophants, which translates to Russian as one who reads fate or one who predicts the future. They were the guardians of secret hermetic knowledge. Where they obtained it is a subject for a separate discussion, so you can read more about it and check the website. In short, we can say that they inherited this knowledge from the previous civilization of Atlantis, and they reproduced the knowledge that was there. This allowed the ancient Egyptian priesthood to manipulate the consciousness of not only the clueless crowd, but even the pharaohs, as beautifully illustrated by Bolesław Prus in his novel Pharaohs. Many have seen the film of the same name. That is the movie. So, for the reliable storage of this knowledge, the ancient Egyptian priesthood was divided into two teams. That is, what if someone might perish? And there were two teams of 11 people each. In Egypt, there were two capitals, Memphis and Thebes. Just as we have two capitals in Russia, Moscow and St. Petersburg. There is something to think about. So, the pharaohs were the visible power, while the real power belonged to the priesthood. But by concealing knowledge, what we have discussed, they gave people a false understanding of reality. Thus, this priesthood, the ancient Egyptian feudal priesthood, has degenerated into what is now called the global backstage, the styles of the West, the world government. So, they migrated, creating an army based on Judaism. And now this mafia has its main headquarters in Switzerland. There are backup points in England, in London. So, in the United States, in Spain, and so on. And for the first time in human history, they set the task, the vector of goals, to establish dominance over other countries and peoples. And they began to create a global totalitarian system subordinate to a single center. So, we quoted the Deuteronomy of Hierasia. Let me quote it to you once again, what was said in the Bible. So Israel, listen to the lawful decrees that I am teaching you today to observe, so that you may live and go and multiply and inherit the lands that the Lord, the God of your fathers, gives you as a heritage. What must be done for this? Do not lend to your brother, meaning the Jew, either silver or bread, or anything else that can be lent. To foreigners, that is, to us, not Jews, you may lend with interest, but to your brother, do not lend with interest, so that the Lord your God may bless you in all your endeavors that are done by your hands on the earth, which you are going to possess. And you will rule over many nations, but they will not rule over you. Then the sons of foreigners will build your walls and their kings, residents, to serve you. And your gates shall not be shut day or night, so that the wealth of other nations may be laid at your feet. And those kings and those nations that do not wish to serve you, such nations will be completely destroyed. Concept. And having created such an army based on Judaism, they scattered this ancient Egyptian priesthood of the Jews around the world. That is, Israel fell apart, the USSR fell apart, oil prices rose for several generations, you know. So they themselves hid in the tribe of Levi and became high priests, who alone have the monopoly on interpreting the truth, while all others must strictly follow the instructions of the Levites. And the entire history of humanity is the process of concentrating and managing the productive forces of humanity. And now this mafia, as I already said, has settled in Switzerland. Here's a theme that can be shown as a cartoon. Having originated in ancient Egypt, having created this army of biorobots, it scattered and implanted them into the bodies of other nations. So as a result, the national priesthood was destroyed. Particularly, you know, the Russian priesthood was eradicated by fire and sword. That is, our shrines were destroyed, so to speak. The Russians were baptized by fire and sword. This was a terrible tragedy for our people as a result. So the global predictor, this ancient Egyptian priesthood, became what is called a tomb-like state management. That is, to conduct global policy. Here they are, countries and nations, country X, Y, Z, and so on. Here they are. So, the mechanism. If some country poorly fulfills the tasks assigned to them, what happens? In the people, tension is escalated. Tension in the nation leads to dissatisfaction with the elite, and thus young promising individuals are taken from within to create a new elite. Here's the management scheme, including what happened in Russia after 1917 and after the 1991 revolution, and what is currently being planned. That is now, so to speak, this global mafia understands that all these elite, the Yeltsin family, Lushkov, all these governors cannot hold Chubais, the Berberists. Therefore, they need to be removed and new ones brought in. And it is currently preparing this new coup in our country, including through the hands of all these so-called opposition, patriotic, democratic parties. Here's the mechanism. Well, I spoke about the role of Judaism and what was done to them during the Sinai pilgrimage. Well, I can briefly remind you why this Sinai pilgrimage was made. In the case of one of the poorest Semitic tribes, they were led into the desert for 42 years, during which, under desert conditions, the elderly quickly perished due to thirst, hardship, the scorching sun, and so on. And those born no longer heard the tales of their grandparents. The connection between generations broke. Ivan, not remembering his lineage, appeared. In other words, what I am saying to the Jews now is that they should not cry, laugh at them, or take offense. It is simply something to understand, because if they do not understand this, they will remain a tool, hostages of this mafia. That's it. Next. An inhumane act was simply carried out against them. So, the mechanism of circumcision of the foreskin in boys on the day of the feast, now having understood genetic terms, and the influence of genetics on the realization of genetically determined developmental potential, which we discussed in previous lectures, it is also clear what was done. That is, this is the mechanism for forming people who can be easily controlled, bypassing consciousness through the subconscious. So, circumcision of the foreskin on the 8th day, unlike Muslims. So you see, everything fits into a certain hole. And now they want to get rid of Judaism and replace them with adherents of the Church of Scientology, as we mentioned in the introductory lecture. These processes also explain the explosions occurring in Israel, because in Israel they are becoming a nation. So here again, we are being deceived through words. So if we define a nation, asking what nationality is being Jewish a nationality or not, we need to first sort it out to provide a definition. There are two definitions of a nation. One definition was given by Joseph Vissarionovich Stalin, and it generally circulates in all dictionaries, textbooks, well, with some modification and without references to Stalin. And Stalin said that a nation is a historically formed community of people united by a common territory, language, culture, psychological and economic way of life. Only all of these taken together give us the definition of a nation. Another definition of a nation, directly opposite, was given by the founder of Zionism, Theodor Herzl, trying to formulate Judaism. Look at what he issued. He said that indeed a nation is a group of people with a common historical past, united in the present against a common enemy. So it turns out there is an enemy, there is a nation. No enemy, no nation. Can you imagine what that means? Well, I ask everyone a question. Normal people, which definition do you support? Well, everyone usually says the first one. Well, when I have various discussions with Jews and so on, I say, you are Jews, right? I am Jewish. So, which definition do you support? The first or the second? Well, it seems Stalin is right. Let's figure it out then. You live in Russia, that is in the territory where, in Russia. What language do you speak, in Yiddish, Hebrew, or in Russian? In Russian. What songs do you drink? What vodka do you drink? Russian songs. Then what kind of Jew are you? He is a blood type. I say, then you are a fascist, because the Führer determined nationality based on blood analysis, urine, and skull size. That's it. As soon as we clearly define what nationality is, everything falls into place. That's why we say Judaism is not a nationality. And the mafia, which was created specifically, is all because Judaism does not fall under the definition of a nation. At best, it falls under a religion. They are raised in Judaism. But a non-Jew can also, so to speak, become a Jew. And further, you know, there are those who have adopted Judaism, and they are considered Jews, meaning the fallacious Kaifeng, that is Chinese Jews, meaning black Jews and so on, like that woman who hosts on television, meaning a black woman, but in reality, she is a Jew. That is, this is a distortion of concepts, meaning it is a lie, endowing an unclear measure of understanding. And Judaism can only be understood through the management of the global historical process. That is what we are talking about. And when they began to return to Israel, there is no ethnic division of labor. There, so to speak, both. The boss is a Jew and the driver is a Jew. And in Russia, why are they? Because they all engage in management from the very beginning, one way or another. That is, they are all bosses. Why? All bankers are Jews. Khodorkovsky, Berezovsky, Gusinsky, Abramovich, and so on. Is that just a coincidence? In art, in literature, Pugacheva is a Jew. Kobzon is a Jew. The rest are all the same, meaning if you look closely, they are all from there, all journalists. That is, they occupy the sphere of unproductive labor. And if you look closely, they are precisely in the field of management. That is, they exert their influence. And in this sense, they become hostages. Why? Because when the people are dissatisfied with the management, what plan does the global mafia implement? Beat the Jews, save Russia. They are to blame for everything. That is, Jews become scapegoats. Well, is it really that hard to understand? Here is the simplest mechanism. So, by endowing all this with a vague measure of understanding, they reduce it to emotions and deprive it of substantive stability.